Hello, Alexia.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom to you too. Okay. So my first question is, I'm going to go to it. My first question is, and I think you have some follow-up ones as well. This is the big burning question, right? For most of the men in this room, it's a big one. Are you ready? Jacob had 4 wives. I knew you were going there. I just knew that, right? Did God approve of that? That's the big question. Did God approve of that? The answer is nowhere does God ever approve of that. God apparently tolerates it, but nowhere does he approve of it. In fact, from the beginning, it wasn't so. We know the heart of God. We see the heart of God in a perfect creation in Genesis chapter 1. And what does he say? Adam, you got 1 woman. Not 4, 1. Eve, you got 1 husband. Not 4, 1. 1 man, 1 woman in a marriage intended for life. That's God's plan. That's God's ideal. So men, give it up. All right. Next question. We don't have any? Okay. Well, this is a little bit different because this deals more with the life of Joseph, and so it's more of a story. But if someone in here has a question, love to answer it. Okay, back here, great. Elena.
Okay, so I'm going to try to make this make sense. But you ended with that verse saying that God makes everything for good.
Yes.
And you were just kind of going through the story of Joseph and saying, Rachel was his favorite wife, but if Laban just gave him the woman that he loved, he would just have 1 wife and he wouldn't have had that issue. But then also, if he didn't have all 4 wives, he wouldn't have all those 12 sons, so there wouldn't be the 12 sons of Israel. And then also if they didn't hate Joseph, they wouldn't have sold him into Egypt, and then eventually he wouldn't have saved him during the famine. So my question is, does God make all of those things happen?
Right.
Or despite of all those things happening, he makes a beautiful story out of it. Like, which way is it?
Yeah, and that's really the big question. Those are great multiple questions trying to mess me up, aren't you? Okay. Great questions. And really the last one is the big one. Does God make all that happen? Or does God bring that to pass in spite of all that happening? So if you're a 5-point Calvinist, he makes it happen. There's no free will. Everyone's just like a complex biological computer that's been pre-programmed to do all the things that you do, right? Now, we know that's not God. That's not what God does. I'm saying that God is going to turn it all around for our good. And he's going to bring about his plans and purposes, but he's going to do that in a way that doesn't override our free choices. So all of this is going to bring about God's plan to save Israel first and the nations, regardless of what Jacob's doing. Whether he married 1 wife, 2 wives, 43 wives, the story would be different, but it's still going to follow a path that brings about God's plan. So I'm saying if Joseph would have said, no, I'm not taking Leah. I pledged my heart to Rachel, and that's it. I'm just doing, God still, the story would have been different, but in some ways the same. Does that make sense? So maybe there'd be 8 sons instead of 12 sons. But it's still going to follow the course of accomplishing God's will and plan to save Israel, bring about the Messiah, and then world redemption. So in that sense, I say, you know what? We make a lot of decisions in life, and God says, you know what? You can do whatever you want. I love you, and you're not going to thwart my plan or purpose. So I will weave those stories in such a way and bring about, through my grace, a redemption that then turns that into blessing. And so the short and skinny is, the story could have followed 1,000 different paths based on 1,000 different ways that decisions could have been made. But God still would have brought about his plan and purpose of the Messiah and redemption for all of us. So this is the way it happened. And I'm thinking to myself, getting back to the whole thing about Well, he had to take Leah. Yeah, in that culture, they were so far from God due to the fall. They were so already in darkness that, yeah, the culture's all messed up. And Laban is lying to Jacob, and Leah gets caught up in all that, out of her own, what she wanted in life, right? She gets thrust into this. And then he picks up the 2 maids of each of these women, and now all of a sudden he has 4 wives, and he's got these kids, and drama. I'm telling you right now, you can go and look at every example of polygamy in the Bible. It never works out. Every example is filled with pain and anguish, and it's just horrible, I hear in the Messianic movement, some of these leaders try to make a case for polygamy, and I'm thinking, what are you thinking? Have you not read what that caused? Just because God's silent doesn't mean that he's affirming it. Just read what that looks like. It's never a good picture, just heartache. So yeah, but regardless, God will bring about his good plans for those that love him and are called according to his purpose. So we've all made mistakes, right? We have all fallen short of the glory of God. And sometimes we're thinking to ourselves, this is it. My life's so screwed up. Why even try? No, God is the God of second chances. God is able to take and lift us up out of the messes we get in. God is the God of new beginnings. He gives us new beginnings. That's the story of Joseph. That's the story of Jacob. That's the story of the brothers, even the wives. It's an amazing story. So, did that kind of answer some of that? Thank you. Thumbs up.
We do have a question from the live stream. How did Joseph not give up? How was he not overtaken by deep depressions by being rejected by his brothers and sold into slavery?
Yeah, I think part of, so the short answer is the grace of God. The ability of God, being who he is, to sustain us in our lowest points where we give up and give in. God has a way of keeping us even when we won't keep ourselves. Okay? Now, initially, Joseph is weathering the storm of his brother's rejection because he has his dad's favor. Once he's in Egypt, he has nothing. He's rotting away in a prison. Can you imagine? He's had these dreams. He thought he knew God, and now everything says the opposite. Yeah, he certainly would have fell into disillusionment and even depression. I'm convinced he did. I'm convinced that probably, although the texts don't support this explicitly, I'm sure he dealt with some pretty profound bouts of depression and not wanting to live anymore. If there was ever a moment in his life where he cried out, my God, why hast thou forsaken me? Surely it would have been in his years spent in that prison. But it's amazing how God can come to us even in those deepest, darkest moments and breathe life into us and sustain us and carry us when we're exhausted and we don't even want to take another step. He's done that for many of us here. He loves us. He's the sustainer. He's the savior. Yeah. And we are the ones being saved. So Joseph really didn't sustain himself. He did give up. God is the one that kept him, like he keeps all of us. And if he can keep Joseph, he can keep us. If you're in a dark place, if you're in despair, if you think you've screwed it all up or that God's abandoned you, read the stories. He doesn't abandon any of his children. There's a great end for your story. Hold on. There's a great end. There's many more chapters. Don't give up. Don't give in. Fall into the grace and love of God. He will sustain you. Okay.
Not any currently.
No more? Make up one. Okay, Minister Don, up in the front.
I'm looking at his story. Doesn't it seem, you can answer this question, that even though, there was times in his life where it was super bad, but it seems like there's still a picture that he gave him as far as hope, in the sense of him being, in Potiphar's house, as far as all of a sudden arising into the position that he was in. So even though what happened to him, it was like God did favor him. And the whole Potiphar's household was blessed, was it not?
Yeah.
And then also when he was in prison, God arose and he was actually, serving people in prison where that doesn't usually happen. I'm saying it seems like in our deepest hurt, doesn't God come and he still has hope for us, things happen?
Yeah. Yes, that is the hope that God brings that sustains us. But there was a point in Joseph's life where he is in that prison and he has no favor, nothing. He is in a desperate place. Now, I think he was in prison for 11 years. When did he rise up and gain some prominence in the prison? It doesn't say. Could have been years. So there could have been some really deep, dark times of just saying, God, I don't even want to live anymore. You gave me dreams that my brothers are going to bow to me. I'm in a prison. I'll never see him again. I'll probably die here. I'm sure they lied to Dad instead of telling him the truth, right? They feared for their own lives. So I think that there was probably some really dark moments in Joseph's life in which he just gave up. And it's only the grace of God that sustained him. And I think even when he was being raised up in the prison system, yeah, that gives you a little bit of hope. But still, I mean, how good does that get? You're in charge of a bunch of criminals that are probably there because they were thinking of themselves in life, So, but it would have been enough, I think, to give you enough hope to continue to live. And then things gradually over a long period of time got better. How many people have ever been in a place where you just felt like, man, I cannot do this anymore? And I just, I'm giving up on God. I'm giving up on my family. I'm just done. I'm done with life. I think that's not unique. I think that as human beings, all of us face trials in our life because of a spirit, a being who hates us, who wants to kill us, who works hard at guilt and shame and betrayal to bring us to a place of hopelessness. And I think that that's more common in human beings than what we maybe consider. And the story of Joseph, of course, is a story of hope. And the hope that we have is this. Doesn't matter how dark it gets. Doesn't matter how bad it gets. Hang on. What God is going to do is so amazing. He's going to turn the tables. He's going to bless. And he's going to cause it to work for my benefit. All I got to do is hold on to him, even when it looks like he's abandoned me. He hasn't. And if you can hold on to that, or rather, if you can just let him hold on to you, you're going to make it. And you're going to have a story similar to Joseph's. An amazing story. To one degree or another, his life intersects with our life. And that's the hope that we have. Final question? Anyone?
There's one more. Do you know who are the modern day tribe of Ephraim and Manasseh?
Well, Ephraim is in Kansas. No, I don't. It's a big area of controversy. Ephraim and Manasseh are the lost tribes. There's 10 lost tribes of Israel. No one really knows where they're at. I mean, there's some general ideas, but no one really knows where they're at. You don't call them lost sons or lost tribes for nothing. Part of being lost is you're lost, right? Now, those who think they can determine the identity of Ephraim and Manasseh, there's just no evidence. I mean, I was talking to a Jewish person who's Jewish by birth, raised in a Jewish home, practicing Judaism, then converted and gave his life to Messiah. I was talking to him about this whole issue of the lost tribes, and he's saying, well, what does it matter? I said, well, identities are very important. He says, yeah, if you can determine that, but how do you determine that? How do you find the evidence that you're one of the lost tribes? Because there is none. He says, I'm Jewish. I was born Jewish. I was raised Jewish. And we have a hard enough time trying to prove our own Jewishness. What's this Manasseh, Ephraim stuff you're playing with? I thought you're exactly right. It's true. Look at the definition of a Jew and then try to determine who's the Jew. It's very, very complicated. It's hard enough for the Jew today who kept their identity to prove their identity. How's Manasseh and Ephraim ever going to do that? So that is the big challenge. So those identities are important, but even what's more important than identity is covenant status. Are you in covenant with God? Because if you're not, none of the ethnic stuff matters anyway. Got to have a covenant. So if you're Jewish, that's great. Do you believe in Yeshua? If you're not Jewish, that's great. Do you believe in Yeshua? Our ethnicities are important, but they're second to covenant status, and that's what matters. However, if you think you know how to prove the lost tribe identities today, love to hear it. I've been looking at that for 30 years, and everyone's saying impossible. But if you found an angle, love to hear it. So that's my best answer. Okay, we have one more. I'm going to go ahead and go here, and then we'll close. Justin.
Okay, so I'll try to make this very quick here. So you think of the story of Job, right? He didn't do anything wrong to make those things happen to him. So I guess you could make the case maybe Joseph shouldn't have shared his dreams, right? But how do we avoid the prison in our lives when sometimes we don't even cause it? Or is it always a causation and maybe Job was an outlier? And then even when we're in there, how do we identify how to get out when we're in that prison that we may not have caused ourselves?
Yeah, that's a great question. And of course, the story of Job's an entirely different story. So if you want to go to the story where I didn't do anything and it still happened, that's the Job story. And for some of us, we didn't do anything and bad things happened, and God, where are you and all of that? That's the Job story. Sometimes we actually do stuff to get us in the mess that we're in. But the grace of God's the same for us. He loves us with an eternal love. And even if we brought some of that on ourselves, it's okay. God's going to cause that to work together for our good too. So there's hope for those who are victims, and there's hope for those who have perpetrated and caused things to come to place that have been very painful for themselves and their family and friends. God is in the business of redeeming all of that. He loves us, and he will see us through. So great question. Go to my series on Job for that previous answer, and stick with me on Joseph, and we'll answer more of your questions as we press into the next couple weeks. Shabbat shalom. Love you guys. Thank you.
Yahweh spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to Aaron and his sons, saying, this is the way you shall bless the children of Israel. Say to them, may Yahweh bless you and keep you. May Yahweh make his face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh lift his countenance upon you and give you peace." And we add, in the name of Yeshua Messiah, the Prince of Peace, so they shall put my name on the children of Israel, and I will bless them. Receive now the name of Yahweh. Yiverikika Yahweh, vayishmareha. Ya'er Yahweh, panav alecha, veichunecha. Yise Yahweh, panav alecha, vayesem lecha. Shalom. B'Shem Yeshua HaMashiach, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom.